Are you more like a pinball or a bowling ball? Yes, this relates to referrals and business in general. Probably more than you know. Let's dive in. Hey there, and welcome to episode 245 of the Roadmap to Referrals podcast, a show about helping you build a referable business. I'm your host, Stacey Brown Randall. I read a book recently that had a reference to being a pinball or bowling ball. And it really struck me, actually, it stuck with me. It stuck with me enough to do a whole episode about it. But I think it's really important for us to understand the concept behind being a pinball or a bowling ball and how this not only applies to referrals and your ability to generate them in your business, but also just about how you operate your business in general. So let's first start with the pinball versus bowling ball concept. So let me explain that concept to you. You may actually already have an idea before I explain it to you. It's not rocket science, but let me explain that to you. And then we're going to dive into how this applies to referrals and then overall how you run your business. Okay, think of a pinball machine. Do you have that visual in your head? More than likely, well, I shouldn't say everybody. So let's just say more than likely most people have at least seen one, and those of us lucky enough to actually have played one, right? I think a lot of people have at least seen them on a movie or actually been in an arcade where you had the ability to play the pinball machine. It's bright. It's colorful. It makes lots of pings and dings and rings and things spin around and light up. And it's just, personally, I think it's a super exciting game to play. It's a little bit more exciting to me to play pinball than it actually is to go bowling. Now, of course, if you had this conversation with my husband, I'm pretty sure he'd say the exact opposite, but that man loves bowling. So think about that pinball machine. Do you have it in your mind? Right? It's bright. It's colorful. It's, pretty fantastic. But what's its purpose? If you think about it, there's a ball that only moves around because of sheer force, because you've pulled the lever back as hard as you can and you have let it rip to have that pinball go flying up to hit as many point-bearing little points like places in the pinball machine to get yourself points as possible. But the ball completely lacks focus. It's just banging around in there, moving from whatever it hits to have that being the trajectory to the next direction it goes to whatever it'll hit next. That'll send it maybe, not to the sides where it'll come right back down ready for you to have to hit it again before, if you miss it, it drops, right? And then you don't have access to it, game over. So whereas the pinball machine is bright and colorful and makes great sounds and it's kind of fun, it's not really the best way to consider running your business, and definitely not the best way to consider growing referrals. Because that ball, while it does move fast when you have that sheer force hit, it lacks focus. And in some cases you don't, in the pinball case, and I would apply this to referrals in business, but in the pinball case, you don't actually control where it goes really. Yes, I know there are things on the side you are frantically trying to hit as fast as you can to keep the ball up so it doesn't drop below, right? But it's this concept of it lacks focus. And then there's this feverish, crazy amount of activity that's happening, right? As you're on the sides. I can't actually remember now if it's on the side or if it's on the top, right? Where you're hitting the things where the little levers will come out and catch the ball before it falls, right? And keep the ball going so you can get more and more points. It just goes where it wants to go. It lacks focus. And in the moment, you're chasing the ball versus the other way around. And if you don't have that sheer force hit at the beginning, you'll never get the ball all the way up to the top of the machine where the biggest points are, or into the areas of that machine where you can actually get the most points. And then you're left frantically pushing the little levers on both sides, getting them to pop up and keep the ball going. Ultimately, a pinball loses or has no focus. It lacks focus. But a bowling ball, on the other hand, it may be a little on the boring side, right? There's no lights and shining. There's no pings and dings and things happening at you. Even the ball coming out of like the ball return is like slow as Christmas. Let's be honest, right? And the bowling ball, it goes on a lane, one direction, from start to finish, hopefully in a straight line. It has a determined target, those little pins at the end, and what hopefully, depending on how good of a bowler you are, a determined path. Now, we all know that the bowling lane, right, when you're bowling, there are gutters, right? So minus the gutters, but let's be honest, we're all going to hit gutters every once in a while in referrals, in business, well, in life in general. But it's not as, in my opinion, as sexy or as exciting as a pinball machine. But a bowling ball is what I ultimately want to be when it comes to how I run my referrals and how I run my business. I know the target. I've determined it. I know the path I'm aiming to take. And I'm trying to go from start to finish, following the path that I've laid out. Yes, to some of you listening to this, you think to yourself, whoa, bowling is so much more fun and so much more exciting than pinball. And others of you may feel the way I feel about it. That's not exactly the point of what I'm talking about. But the point is determining that sometimes we chase the things that are really fun and exciting and they colorful, right? If you're relating it to that pinball machine and just with sheer force, we're just going to try to make it happen and then frantically putting all our energy into something, trying to keep it going. When the truth is, we need to be more like a bowling ball when it comes to referrals and business. So let's first talk about what it looks like to be a pinball when you're thinking about referrals. Like, what does it look like to be a pinball in application of your referrals, and then business in general? And then we'll do the same thing with bowling ball, where I'm going to talk a little bit about how this approach helped me back in 2021 and some of the things that it did for me taking a bowling ball approach versus a pinball approach to my business as well. So, but first, let's start with the pinball, right? When you think about being a pinball in your referral generation, right, and trying to get referrals, it kind of reminds me of the very generic spray and pray method that people take to business development. Now, I don't mean all people. I just mean at some point in your business ownership career, you may have this moment of, I feel like I'm out there being at all the places, doing all the things, spending the money in all the in all the places I'm supposed to. I'm out there doing all the things I'm supposed to do to try to get, right, in this case, right, what we're talking about here, referrals. And it's like I'm just spraying, right, and then praying something lands because I'm just spreading myself super thin. People do this with business development strategies as well, right? They got like 15 irons in the fire trying to bring in clients. You're just spreading yourself so thin. You're just spraying out there to see everything and anything you think you're supposed to do. And then truly, you're actually just left with praying that something will hit, that something of the 15 things you decided to do will actually land you prospects that have the potential to turn into clients. Now, I actually don't believe that in business, from a business development perspective, you should have a singular focus of how you bring in clients. I actually think that's dangerous. I think you should have a couple of ways of how you bring in business, how you bring in new clients. But I want those to be like tested and proven. I want them to work. Right? So whether that number for you is 3 or 2 or 4 or 5, I am not going to be the judge of that. But what I do know, and having not just one business, but 2 businesses under my belt, and one that had a singular way of growing business. And then when I ran out of capacity to continue that singular way of growing my business, which was pounding the pavement networking, there wasn't any other way to grow my business. When that time ran out, and I didn't have that time or that space, the business couldn't survive. And you guys know I'm referencing my first business that was a failure after 4 years. And so when I think about the way that this business has evolved, right, there has always been a diversification to how I bring in clients. Referrals just happens to be the largest, but it is by far not the only. Because I do believe, as I've said, that I think it's dangerous to only grow your business in one way. I think that you should really have a multi-prong approach, but that multi-prong does not have 15 prongs. It doesn't even need to have 7 or 8 prongs. It may just have a solid 3 or 4 for you. Whatever your number is, whatever works, whatever's bringing in clients. Because let's be honest, we all know we only have so much time in the day. So when you think about people generating referrals, sometimes I feel like I'm watching pinballs in front of me. When they're explaining to me the things that they're doing to try to generate referrals, I'm either going to hear a lot of things that they think are generating referrals, that they think has momentum to generate referrals. And I know they're not going to work for them, but they don't just have one thing that's not working. They have all these things because they've read all the articles, they've read all the books. They're trying to figure out how to do all the things to generate referrals. And they are like a pinball, and they are shooting all over the place trying to figure out how to bring in referrals. I always think that's indicative of a larger issue in their business. They're probably a pinball when it comes to overall business development. So let's just take referrals out of it for a second and look at all of business development, marketing, prospecting, and referrals, looking at that three-legged stool of your sales strategy, right? If you're pinballing it with referrals, you're probably pinballing it like everywhere. And yes, I just turned pinball into a verb. I like it. We're going to keep going with it. Pinballing. So if you're pinballing your referral generation, you're not actually spending enough time in the right places long enough to see if anything fruitful can happen. Because whereas you may get away with pinballing around different business development strategies, right? Though I think there's lots of business development people out there listening being like, I would disagree with that. You may be able to pinball your way through some other strategies that may work or may not work, which I don't recommend that. But I understand that some people do that and have some level of mediocre success. When it comes to referrals, we're talking about relationships. And you can't just pinball through those and think they're actually going to generate not just referrals in the moment, but referrals long-term and with some level of sustainability, which you ultimately need. And when you run your business from a pinball mentality as well, right? You constantly feel like every time you're turning around, you're asking your brain to completely switch to a different mode of thinking because you're moving from the pinball method of, hey, I'm looking at my financials and now I'm looking at marketing copy. And oh, yes, I've got to go write this blog. Oh, right. Let me hop over here and have this client call. Oh, now I've got a prospect call. Oh, yes. Now I've got to go write this email to my team, or now I've got to go deal with this IT vendor. Like whatever it is, when you allow yourself to pinball through your business overall, or just pinball through your months or your weeks or even your days, you kind of apply the I'm letting it run me versus me running it. Now, let's be honest, there are always going to be days where somebody, and I mean your business, is going to be running you. But the majority of your days, we would really like for us to be in charge, right? We would really prefer that we're in charge of our days and not the other way around. But I know things happen, right? There's seasons and things happen and there's ups and downs. But if you think about being a pinball and you think about pinballing your way through your day, your week, your month, your quarter, your year, you never make the progress that you want. So if you're going to operate as a pinball, these are the cons you have to recognize, right? Because here's the thing, whether you feel like it's happening to you, you're making a conscious decision to allow yourself to be a pinball. Now, removing yourself from being a pinball and switching to a bowling ball, that's no easy feat. Like, I'm not saying you can just snap your fingers, boop, and all of a sudden now you're a bowling ball. It takes a concentrated effort into how you're going to spend your time, what's going to be allowed to be on your calendar, what's going to be allowed to be on your to-do list, what's working, what's not, where do you need to lean in, where do you need to pull back, what do you have to say no to, who do you have to say no to? There's a lot to it. I recognize that. But this idea of letting your business be run by a pinball and in effect allowing your referrals and your overall business development, but down to the heart of referrals being run by a pinball, you're never going to actually get to the heart of what makes referrals so stinking awesome. And that is consistency. It's the consistency of receiving them. Just today, as I was getting ready to do this recording, I had the pleasure and privilege to write 2 thank you notes for 2 referrals recently received. It's an amazing feeling. And that's what I want for you. And understanding what that looks like and understanding what it feels like to have consistency and sustainability with your referrals is what I ultimately want for you. I know there's a lot of tactics out there, and you can pinball your way through a lot of different tactics to generate referrals. You can try this asking methodology. You can try this incentivizing methodology. You can try this process. You can try this script. You can try this. You can try that. There's a lot. Trust me, I know. There's a lot out there that I'm trying to get through the noise on. And every day I turn around, there's some new person is like, oh, now I teach people how to do referrals because it worked for me in this one way, right? I totally understand, and everyone's on their own journey, and that's great. But like, if you want to generate referrals and you actually try to figure it out, you are going to be hit with an onslaught of different ways to do it. But what you need to ask yourself is, if I'm going to invest the time and energy and resources into learning a way to generate referrals, is it a way that I want to do not 3 days from now, but 365 days from now, and maybe 3 years from now? And will it be able to provide results? And that is always the big question. Like I always say, your methodology of how you want to generate referrals should work for you. And it should work. Period. Full stop. So we can't be a pinball. But let's talk about what it looks like to be a bowling ball when it comes to not only our referrals, but also our business. Hey there, pardon the interruption. If you're listening to this episode right now on February 21st, 2023, the day this episode went live, then you're not too late. Nope, you can still snag your spot in the 3 days to learn how to re-engage inactive referral sources bootcamp. Day 1 is today, and it is not too late. Please go directly to stacybrownrandall.com/bootcamp and sign up now. It's not too late. You can still get all the information you need and join us on day 1. And even if you know, I don't even know if I can go through everything, all 3 days of this boot camp, you'll have access to the recorded materials for 30 days. So get in now while you can. Go to stacybrownrandall.com/bootcamp. And don't forget, Stacy has an E. Okay, let's talk about bowling balls as it relates to referrals and business. Now, as you can imagine, because I set it up this way, you already know why and how we're looking at bowling balls as probably the one you want to pick. Maybe not. You do you. But the idea here is that bowling ball is very focused. It has a very determined path, right? That's what we want for you when you think about how you're going to generate referrals. And then I'll talk about this from a business perspective as well. But let's be honest, we all know that when we are focused, right? So when we know what our target is, so having that determined target, understanding what the path is, that as best we can tell right now, right, is the determined path that we're going to go on. Think about the lane, right? And trying to get the ball in the center of the lane to actually hit the pins, right? Get that strike, get your turkey, whatever it takes. But it's focused. Everything about a bowling ball is focused. There's no ultimate sheer force that's going to hit that bowling ball into movement, into action. It's going to take you actually focusing and adjusting and concentrating and then trying to give it the best possible spin you can give that ball, which is something I've never been able to do with a bowling ball, though I am jealous of those people who can. But the bowling ball is focused. And it has one singular focus in the moment of what it's trying to do, which is get down the middle of the lane as best possible and knock over all the pins at one time so you don't have to wait forever for the ball return to come back up and try again and get that split, right? So here's the thing. You need to kind of apply the same thing in referrals. And let's talk about what that means for business too. But when we're looking at being a bowling ball, having a determined path and very focused, what I like to tell people when it comes to referrals is it's one thing at a time. Now, a lot of people hear me talk about, particularly in my coaching program, building a referable business, they hear me talk about these 18 strategies. And I understand for a moment that probably if you're hearing it for the first time or you're really letting it sink in, you may be like, what? That's a lot of freaking strategies. 18. No, you'll never need all of them. Trust me, I don't even use all of them, right? You'll never need all of them. Some of them are situational, only to be used in the moment. Some of them are next level that you'll actually never use. But when you're deciding that you want to generate referrals, particularly in the way that I teach it, but I would say with anything you're trying to learn how to do and to put into practice in your business, you need to do one thing at a time. right? It's like when you're teaching a child to brush their teeth or tie their shoe. You don't try to be like, here's 14 things you need to do all on top. No, you're like, hey, guess what? We hold a toothbrush with the bristles up. And that's lesson number 1. Here's the toothpaste, right? We squeeze it gently, not as hard as possible, right? And for some of you, you're like, and not from the middle or the top, only from the bottom, right? And then, hey, this is how we actually put the toothbrush in our mouth to brush our teeth. We take it step by step by step. And I think it's really important when you're learning something new that you're learning it step by step by step. It's actually how the brain takes it and is like, oh, okay, got it. I know these steps. Now I can go on autopilot. I mean, who actually thinks about the steps of brushing their teeth in the morning, or do you just do it? We all just said we just do it, right? Unless we're like 2 and we're learning how. It's the same thing with referrals. It's one thing at a time. You learn one strategy. You apply it. You get it working. You're in implementation mode before you move on to the next strategy. Now, inside BRB, that's Building a Referable Business, the coaching program, we actually do something called strategy stacking. And I have a training that I do for people who are interested in BRB and interested in understanding how is it even possible that I double, triple, quadruple folks' referrals in 1 year's time. When they're interested, you're at that point in your journey with me and you're interested about learning, okay, how does she do this? How does she 2x, 3x, and 4x referrals in a year? And what does that look like inside the functionality of our coaching program where I do that? One of the things that we do is called strategy stacking. And I talk about it and I actually teach it in a very specific private training that I do. And I do these trainings just a couple of times a year. We actually have another one, our first one for this year coming up in March. So I will send out information. If you're on my email list, you'll get information about that. If you have attended one in the past and want to attend again, you certainly can. If you've never attended one, obviously, and you're interested, I want you to be there. Or if you've even signed up in the past and then you didn't make it to the live one and you didn't watch the recording, you can come back to attending this private training that actually isn't you have to complete the application for BRB, the coaching program. That doesn't mean you're under any obligation to join BRB. But we teach this concept called strategy stacking. Now, I'm not going to teach it right now because that's something I teach in that training for those that are interested in potentially taking the next step with me. But this whole idea that you do one thing at a time, one strategy at a time, and even the same thing that I teach my coaching program members is like, you're going to learn this strategy. You're going to eat, sleep, and breathe it. I'm kidding. You're not. You don't need that much time, but you're going to be putting in one strategy at a time before you move on to your second one. Now, some strategies, you need like 30 minutes to learn it. Some strategies, you may need a couple of months, right? That's why the coaching program goes for 12 months. And so the idea here is that be a bowling ball when you think about referrals. Determined path, determined target, focused, one thing at a time so you have a chance for it to work. When you think about actually going a little bit bigger, right, and kind of zooming out on this a little bit and applying this to your business development, right, which is for some of us, most of us should be more than just referrals, but it could also be marketing and prospecting and things that we do as well, right? It's the same thing as like when you decide to invest in a strategy, whether this is you're going to join a leads group or you are going to write a book or you're going to be a guest on podcast, any of those things that you decide to do, be a bowling ball with it. Don't spread yourself too thin. Don't be pinballing around. Be a bowling ball, be focused and be committed, but understand what the ultimate objective is at the end. Right? What are the actual little pins that are standing up? Like, what do they mean? Why do you want to hit them down? Understand what that is before you step into doing something. But if we go even further out and we zoom even further out on what this means for business, I want to tell you a little story. So back in the end of 2020, which I know for most people, you say that year and you guys expect a COVID story. This is not a COVID story at all. Actually, I think it was just a journey my business was on. It just happened to hit this point in my journey of my business and also a global pandemic at the same time. And a lot of people have asked me, like, how did the pandemic impact your business? And to be honest, not much, which is a really cool thing to be able to say, but it's also how my business had been structured, right, for that moment as well in time. So, I mean, obviously there was no in-person speaking gigs. Like it's not like my business wasn't impacted like at all, but just not much. But as I was coming through 2020 And like you, I was tired, right? Because of all the things. I have 3 children. Can you imagine what online school looks like at home with 3 kids and you and your husband? And we were lucky ones. Our kids weren't at home for that full next year like most kids were 2020 through 2021. But when I was coming at the end of 2020, I felt like there were just a number of things I wanted to fix in my business. And my actually 2021 intention word became fix it. That was my intention word for the things that I felt were not working as best they should be in my business and that I had put off taking care of them for long enough. And I created this big Excel spreadsheet by categories with deadlines of all the things I wanted to fix in my business. There were 70 something things on that list. And if something would come up throughout 2020, I would just throw it on the list. Because in 2020, let's be honest, I wasn't fixing most. I was like everybody else, just like trying to survive this new normal that we found ourselves in and helping my children survive through it as well. And so for me, I just kind of created this massive list of fix it things. And then 2021 hit and I was like, yeah, these are the things I need to fix in my business. And I was very bowling ball, like this fix it list. I made priorities. I understood why I was doing things. I understood what order I needed to do things in from a priority perspective. I did things that were first best for my clients, second that was best for my business growth, third best that was for my operations, and then anything else that kind of came after that. And I kind of just attacked the list. I was in fix it mode, right? You can imagine what it looked like as I was striking things off. Now, for those of you like wondering how many did I actually accomplish, I didn't actually accomplish them all. But I did over 50 of them. I was like super duper proud of myself. But the ones I didn't accomplish were the ones that I realized I didn't want to do anymore, or I didn't want to have on my to-do list or on my fix-it list. And that journey of marking things off my list and looking at how I ran my business, and like before you go in to fix something, you have to, like in the moment you'd be like, yeah, I need to fix that. Right? But then when you actually have to go put in the energy to fix it, you really start thinking, do I want to fix this? Is it something that needs to stay? Is it something that can be improved upon? Why do I care? You ask yourself all those questions before you put in the work of fixing it. So as I dove into fixing it, it forced me to really pay attention to my business and to how that I was running my business. And that year in 2021, with my fix it list and my intention word for the year of fix it, that process gave me some of the greatest clarity I've ever had in my business. It set me on a growth path that had me excited and at peace. And it gave me a lot of joy and happiness because what I did throughout 2021 was start the process of truly evolving my business yet again. And I think you go through many, many evolutions as a business owner as you tweak what you offer, how you offer it, what your pricing structure is, right? All those things I think evolve over time. But I went through probably one of the biggest shifts I had gone through since 2015 when I decided I was going to have online programs in addition to way back then my one-on-one coaching to save up some time, right? And so for me, as I went through that 2021 journey, I wish I had journaled better through it, to be honest. And I wish I had recorded all my phone calls that I had with one of my business besties, because I can only imagine what a crazy person I probably sounded like halfway through until things started to click for me of like, how do I want to show up for my clients? How do I want to help these business owners get the greatest success they've ever had with referrals before? How do I want to help them in the moment? How do I want to show up? What is my sweet spot? What do I want to be saying when I show up? Like, I had to think about all the things. I retired 5 different programs that year. I shed a bunch of stuff in my business. Originally, some of those things had been on the fix-it list to make better. And when faced with it, I said, nope, I don't need to do this anymore. This isn't the core of where I want to be. This is muddling my message. This is taking too much time without the return on investment I'm ultimately looking for, or I just don't want to anymore. Those were all acceptable responses for me. And that is where actually this coaching program you guys hear me talk about, BRB, Building a Referable Business, it was birthed in 2021. And I launched it in fourth quarter of 2021. And it has been my greatest joy in business, obviously, right? Like it is one of the things I'm super proud of. A couple of things. My book 1. I should say book 1 because I will eventually have book 2 out. But book 1, I was really proud of my first book that I published. I'll be proud of any other books that come behind it. I'm really proud of this podcast. I'm really proud of the results I get my clients. And I'm really proud that I had the guts to offer a program like BRB and everything that it entails. It is more access to me than my clients have ever received before. But yet it is so gratifying for me because I get to show up and pour into them without feeling like every hour is devoted to that. And so it's just this amazing combination of how that coaching program ultimately works. And that has a lot to do with like how it's structured and framed and things like that. But for me, I became very much a bowling ball when things started to click. And I realized what I could retire, what I could shed, what I could say no to, and then start focusing on ultimately what I want to do and having those singular focuses back in my business. And it's been fabulous for me. It's been a journey. I'm not talking about something I did in 2022. I'm talking about something I did in 2021. And now it's 2023. And guess what? I'm still on this journey. I'm still figuring those things out. And I am like any other entrepreneur that bright, shiny objects, they can get me. Like I am just, I have a weakness for bright, shiny objects as much as the next person. And there are many times when people will say something to me, I'll be like, nope, put your blinders on. That is not what you need to do. And then there are times when people say things to me and it's like, I hear God saying, yep, you need to follow up with that. Right. And I'm not perfect at it. And I'm still learning. And there's all this learning to be left to done every day, every year, right? But to be where I am now versus where I was, it's been a beautiful journey to get me here. And it's because I stopped acting like a pinball and I started acting like a bowling ball. But I also created the mechanisms in place I needed to feel confident in being a bowling ball. I needed a coaching program structured in the way BRB is structured that I've never had before. And that was a game changer for me. But I don't think if that idea had come to me in 2015 or 2018 or even 2019 or 2020, I would have gotten it, right? I just don't think I would have been there. So God moments, right? All along the way, putting me in the path of where I am today. And that's just what I want to encourage you with, right? I want you to take out of this episode the idea of being a bowling ball, not a pinball. And yes, as it applies to your referrals, but also as it applies to how you run your business in general. And again, you don't snap your fingers and go from being a pinball to a bowling ball overnight. This takes time. And there are still days where I'm pinballing around in my business. And then there's other days where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the bowling ball of all bowling balls. I'm picking up speed. Here I come for you, center pin. I'm about to have a very productive day doing all the right things. But I have both kind of days in my business. There's nothing perfect about my world. So that's what I want for you. And I want you to consider what it looks like to have less pinballing in your business and more balling in your business. That sounds weird. Let me say it again. I want you to have less pinballing in your business and more balling in your business. Okay, you got me. Just go with me here. All right, let's wrap this up. If you have thoughts on this episode, I would love to hear it. If you're on my email list, all you ever have to do is hit reply on any of those emails I send to you and just tell me what you thought about this episode or any other episode or a topic you would love for me to tackle. You, of course, can find everything we talked about in this episode on the show notes page at stacybrownrandall.com/245. And don't forget to snag your spot in my 3-day re-engagement bootcamp. Well, I'll teach you the exact strategy I teach my BRB members on how to re-engage inactive referral sources. This is a perfect task and strategy for first quarter. Coming up next week is episode 246. And we're going to talk about how to apply the KISS strategy to referrals. And no, I'm not talking about kissing. Until then, take control of your referrals and build a referable business. Bye for now.